watching Rogers TV.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hello and welcome to HealthLink, a program connecting home, community, and healthcare. My name is Carol Merton, and today I'm delighted to welcome to the program Judy Porteous. Judy is the Regional Integration Lead, Bruce, Grey, Dufferin, Huron, Perth, Lambton, for the Ontario Osteoporosis Strategy. That's a long title, Judy. And we're going to be talking today about Osteoporosis Awareness Month, osteoporosis, and the new clinical guidelines around osteoporosis. So thank you for being on the program today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know you had said you had a little bit of a croaky throat, so you just drink or do whatever you have to during the program. I am sure our audience will understand, and I may even do the same. So make yourself comfortable as you can while you're talking and being on the show. So thanks for being here. Well, you sent some slides and some graphics, and I know our producer will put them up as we go through this, but I wonder if you'd first tell me a bit about Osteoporosis Canada and why is November Osteoporosis Awareness Month?
Mm-hmm. So Osteoporosis Canada is 42 years old this year, which is kind of young for a not-for-profit organization, but it really was started grassroots by people who had osteoporosis and had nowhere to turn. And so osteoporosis was born, or Osteoporosis Society at that time, and it changed its name later to Osteoporosis Canada. And we are now the go-to national organization really serving all Canadians.
Excellent. So why November? Why? Is there any special reason for November?
Well, October 20th is International Osteoporosis Awareness. So I think we've kind of followed on the heels of that. It's also National Fall Prevention Month. And, we always say you can't talk about osteoporosis without talking about fall prevention and fracture prevention. So it really fits nicely.
So, and we'll be covering those as we go through the program today for sure. So, osteoporosis, what exactly is it and who gets it?
Great question. And I really love to clarify that osteoporosis is very similar word to osteoarthritis. And so people do often get confused between the two. Osteoarthritis, which a lot of people experience with pain, so their joints ache, and osteoarthritis is a condition of the joints and surrounding tissues. And so people feel pain in their hips, their ankles, their wrists, everywhere, they feel pain. Where osteoporosis is about the bones. Okay. So it's a condition where bones become thin and weak and at risk of fracture. But the unusual thing, you can't feel bone loss. So they call it the silent thief.
Oh, because bone is, and you'll talk more about what happens to the bone with osteoporosis. So you're here to talk about osteoporosis, but also bone health. And why should we care about bone health?
Well, some people might not know this, but we all have at least 206 bones in our body. So whenever I'm speaking to groups, I always say, count up the number of people in the room, multiply that by 206. That's a lot of bones we should care about. Bone, we need to worry about bone every day. We need to think about bone every day. And I want to talk more about what we need to keep our bones healthy. But it's really important as a skeleton. And I know Mark has an image of a bone hip and a bridge and a structure, and looking at the architecture of a hip bone versus a bridge. And you have struts and girders that join together to keep a bridge strong. And basically our bone is like that in a matrix that keeps the bone strong as well. It is meant to last us all our life. And we do start growing bone, of course, when we're children, when we're babies, and we reach our peak bone mass by about age 30, boys and girls, even younger sometimes. And we start losing bone at about age 30 for different reasons.
So it is important to think about bone health because we need that scaffolding our whole life through, but also changes happen to our bones that we can't see after the age of 30.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I know Mark has another image too of bone remodeling, which I always like to talk about. And I'm sure any of the viewers here, if anybody's ever, anybody ever seen a pothole in Grey or Bruce County? So, bone remodeling is much like repairing a pothole in the road. A lot of people don't know this process goes on within us all the time. And what happens, it's just like the workmen come along, they see a pothole, they might take out the old asphalt, clean it up, put the new asphalt in, tap it down, and the repair is complete. Well, our body actually comes along with kind of an acid, cleans out the little damaged bit on our bone, brings along new cells, fills the hole, and then it hardens along with, calcium, phosphorus, and all those minerals that we need. And the repair is complete. And this is ongoing. I've heard that it takes 7 to 10 years. Our skeleton almost completely remodels.
Interesting. So that leads me to a question. Are you saying then that with proper management, and I know you'll be talking about that, if someone has osteoporosis, there is a chance they can help to remodel their bone?
There's still that controversy or whether we actually grow new bone without help. But we can maintain bone, and that's really, really important. So if we have grown our biggest bone structure by the time we're 30, as long as we keep doing the things the bones need, such as getting enough calcium daily, getting enough vitamin D, getting enough protein, vitamin K and magnesium are very important as well. We can talk later about whether we need to supplement or from our diet, but getting those things and physical activity is key. Bones love muscles pulling on them. And I didn't mention the two types of cells that really work on bone remodeling. There's chewers and builders, the osteoclasts with a C and the osteoblasts with a B. But those osteoblasts that actually build bone, muscles pulling on bone activate those osteoblasts. So any movement people can do, even if it's getting up, going to the sink, standing up during a commercial, but the more and exercise you get, the better, of course.
So bone health involves nutrition, activity, exercise, a variety of things, really. It's a whole menu for bone health, really. I want to ask now about who's at risk for osteoporosis and what can happen with osteoporosis.
Yeah, virtually anyone, men and women. And I think for a long time in past years, we thought it was only women that were at risk. But again, as we are living these wonderful longer lives, men are more at risk. Age is definitely a risk factor with bone health. We build, as I said, we build that architecture, we build that strongest bone frame that we're going to have by the time we're teens into our 30s. And that's the bone we're going to have the rest of our life. So, sometimes though it's genetics or other factors that people can't control. If people are, their parents were fine boned, smaller frame, then, they may not be able to grow as larger bone. They might be more at risk. They might be even more at risk of having bone loss in later age.
Yeah. So being at risk, what can result? In your information, you've talked about fragility fractures. What does fragility fracture actually mean?
So when people develop osteoporosis, meaning the bones get thin and weak and at risk of fracture, even a simple fall from standing height or less or maybe a hard cough, or leaning into a freezer and, really putting force on their spine, lifting a heavy object can actually break a bone.
Wow.
Our bones are really meant to withstand a low trauma like that, but a fall from standing height or less is often an indicator that, not just a fall, a fracture, if they fall and break, is that fracture is an indicator that it may be bone health related.
So, you mentioned it was a silent thief. How do people even know to be careful or to change what they're doing when you have a silent thief? Are there signs of osteoporosis for people to look for?
Yes, actually. Although you don't feel that bone loss, a fracture is an obvious sign, which, we hope people don't even get to that point, but it is definitely a signal. And so a wrist fracture after the age of 40 or 50 is really one of those large telltale signs that maybe if you've broke your wrist from a simple fall, you put your hands out to catch your fall, is that they really should be investigated. And we do have a program at Bright Shores Health System at the Owen Sound site. We have a nurse, Judy Porteous, and she is our fracture prevention coordinator. So if somebody does have a fracture, sees an orthopedic surgeon, she will look at how they broke and talk to them about their fracture, and then as needed be able to send them on for further investigation to prevent another fracture.
Okay. So, a slip and fall, whether it's icy as we head into winter, it still at the age of 40 or beyond is reason. It's not just, oh, well, I slipped on ice, but if they broke, for further screening and investigation potentially is what you're saying.
Yes. Now, Julie's program screens people over 50. That's the evidence shows that's maybe the age that most people would be at risk for osteoporosis. And again, it is it is more common with aging, but we see it at all ages. So
yeah. So there are, from time to time, clinical guidelines that come out. Can you explain what clinical guidelines, what that means? And then are there new ones now that we should pay attention to?
Yeah, actually last year, the Osteoporosis Canada and the Canadian Medical Association Journal published new really updated guidelines, not necessarily new, adding on to the ones from 2010. But the more research that is done, the more that they can see that, they want only to look at people, what's the best way to diagnose osteoporosis? What's the best way to treat it? What's the best way to manage it? So they don't want to treat people that aren't high risk for another fracture. And so the guidelines changed to reflect that. And very significantly, they put a lot of emphasis on balance and muscle strengthening exercise as kind of the number one thing for people to look at to prevent fractures and secondary fractures. So really important, again, for balance training and muscle strengthening and resistance exercise. And just simply resistance exercise, anytime you lift or use your body against gravity, you're really resisting and doing resistance exercise. So building muscle and strength to prevent falls, because if we can prevent a fall, then perhaps we can prevent a fracture.
So clinical guidelines really are best practice, the best way to approach it based on research. So it's studied and evaluated, and it's strong recommendations for practice. So I'm going to run something by you. I'm, a certain age. We're not going to share how old. And I've had a few tumbles and fumbles and stumbles. So you're telling me the more I do on my balance and my exercise, the better for my bones. and my body is saying, stay still because you're at risk of falling. How do we juggle fear of falling and breaking something and the reality that movement is important?
I think my short answer would be get help. Ask for help because I'm like you. I mean, I've had a fracture in the past and I know the fear of falling. And, through a lot of physiotherapy, exercise programs, support through our healthcare system, there is support there. And of course, if you're on our website, there's lots of YouTube videos, webinars, podcasts, information. Is lots of information. But number one, if you are afraid of getting up out of your chair because you've had a fall, or you have a fear of falling, or a fear of having another fracture, is tell somebody, ask for help because there is support. And that really, they call it the fall cycle. If you have a fear of falling, you want to sit still, but if you sit still, your body deconditions. And if you decondition, you're more at risk. So we don't want to sit still.
Right. Now you did mention vitamins and I wonder if you could spend a few minutes talking about what people should take. Are there supplements they should consider? And what are the foods that you would suggest? Because that people have a variety of food sensitivities or allergies. So maybe you can fill us in on what we can do to help ourselves every day.
Absolutely. And for bone health, so we know a key is calcium, that we need to have calcium. Some people might not know that almost every cell in our body uses calcium every day to function. So calcium is one of those things that we need to get enough of, hopefully through our diet every day. Because if we don't, guess what happens? Everybody knows calcium's stored in bones. Our body has a way of telling it that we need calcium. And if we're not getting enough daily through our diet, it'll rob our bones. And so that can cause bone loss. So calcium is found, of course, in dairy food. Some people can't have dairy, but there's green leafy vegetables, fruits, there's breads. By the end of 2025, I just read again, Health Canada is going to increase the amount of vitamin D in milk. So that'll help with the vitamin D. But calcium is found in a wide variety of foods. And then it is also fortified in some other alternative milks, nut milks, etc. We do have a calcium calculator on our website that people can go online. Locally, there are dietitians. You can go to the health unit. There's lots of different supports locally. And I guess I want to say at this point, and I know Mark's putting up our contact information. If people have a question, contact Osteoporosis Canada, contact me, contact your local healthcare provider. There are lots of local supports that can help direct you in the right direction to see whether you're getting enough calcium. And again, we're saying now in the new guideline, don't supplement calcium if you don't have to, because it can do some bad things, build up in your arteries, kidney stones, that kind of thing. Talk to your healthcare provider, pharmacist, etc.
Yeah.
Vitamin D, if I can just go on for a minute and talk about vitamin D, it is the one thing that we really can't get enough from food usually. So Health Canada and us recommend at least 400 international units daily, and then a little more as we get older as well.
I'm writing that down. 400 a day, you're saying?
Yes, and up to 600 when you're over 50, and as we're over 70, about 800 international units.
You mentioned magnesium and vitamin K. Magnesium wouldn't be one I would immediately think of. So can you fill me in a little bit on the role of magnesium and then, of course, vitamin K?
So again, magnesium, very important for absorption, muscle strength, etc. But again, looking at the clinical guidelines, we're not recommending supplementation of either magnesium or vitamin K, but a lot of people ask about them. And the reason we don't is that a lot of, especially green leafy vegetables, etc., have a lot of, you can get magnesium and vitamin K through your diet if you're eating a widely balanced diet. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's helpful. So in spite of all a person's great efforts to keep their bone mass and healthy bone, they get osteoporosis. It could be diagnosed as a result of a fracture. What other tests can be done to monitor your bone density or mass? And then are there medications people need to be aware of that can help?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about risk factors leading up to osteoporosis. There's no single cause for osteoporosis that they've found, but there are risk factors. And the one I mentioned already was age. Whether you're male or female, it does different. Women go through menopause, of course. So there's an accelerated bone loss at that time. Whether you've had that fragility fracture, if you know that your parent had a hip fracture or osteoporosis, that could be a risk factor for you. Other medical conditions, some affect bone health, rheumatoid arthritis, for example, or some medications. Medications like steroids, glucocorticoids, it's called, over 5 milligrams over 3 months of a year can have an effect. 2 or more falls in a year may be a risk factor. Current smoking, which we know smoking's bad for a lot of things, and over alcohol intake over 3 drinks per day. Those are all risk factors. And so once a person's over the age of 70, they are eligible for a bone mineral density to assess them for their bone density without any risk factors. If they're between 65 and 69, one of those risk factors, if it's present, and younger, so 50 to 65, 2 of those risk factors, or having had a fragility fracture, would indicate they should have a bone mineral density test to determine their fracture risk assessment in the next 10 years.
Yeah. Now that maybe you can explain what that test is and where people can go to get it.
I think I might have sent Mark a picture of bone mineral density test. We're not seeing the pictures, but it's a test that they do at the hospital. The doctor would order it. It's not self-ordered. So it's really important because they found that, and this was one of the changes with the guidelines, is that they were doing testing for anybody 65 and older, but realized, no, they were doing a lot of tests, but it wasn't showing that people were at risk for a fracture yet. So then they changed it up to 70, unless you have risk factors. Yeah. The new tool is called FRAX, F-R-A-X, and anybody who likes to Google can go online to F-R-A-X, FRAX, look for a Canadian flag, and that'll have the Canadian data, because all over the world it is different. And so we are comparing people to Canadians, and there's a number of questions. You simply answer those, and you would know, getting a score of what your risk of having a fracture in the next 10 years could be. And that can be done with or without a bone mineral density score, which is really good, because some people can't have them. If you've had a double hip replacement, yeah, you can't have a normal bone mineral density test.
Because that's like would you call it an X-ray, or it's not a blood test, it's not a urine test, it's...
Yes. They call it is a diagnostic imaging, and it does send a very low dose of X-ray through your one hip usually, and the bottom 4 lumbar. So think of a sheer curtain and a solid blind. Sunlight can get through the sheer curtain, but not through the solid blind. And just like that, the BMD, the X-ray, can either get through your bones if they're thin and weak, but if they're still solid, not as much. And they can measure, very complicated, but they can measure that. And so the radiologist would do that and send it to your family physician, and they would let you know.
Now, So there's ways that individuals can score themselves using the FRAX tool, right?
Mhm.
So you can basically take control of your diet, you can take control of your nutritional status, you can get advice, and you can self-score to be able to
Exactly.
be part of
And,
it.
and height and weight is really important. And so that's one of the new things with the guidelines is looking at the BMI, which is the combination of the height and weight together to look at the body structure. And so a low BMI can be also a risk factor for osteoporosis and fracture.
So low BMI would be the ratio between height and weight. So
Yes,
you had
yes,
mentioned about smaller frame people and that, so that factors into that and the genetics as well.
exactly. We used to just look at low body weight, but they also take height into the whole picture now. So
Judy, we have about 3 minutes left in the program, and you've got so much important information, but I want to leave it with you to share what you really want our audience to focus on. Mark texts me when I'm getting down to the wire, so I'll
okay.
let you know. Take it away.
All right. Well, so the really good news, it's never too late to do something about your bone health. And I often say, you know, if you could do something starting today to prevent a hip fracture, would you? And so that might be getting a little more exercise, balance training, muscle strengthening. Make sure you're eating a well-balanced diet. Tea and toast isn't enough. Protein at every meal, a little bit, is really important. Getting enough calcium from your diet if you can. Talk to your doctor if he thinks you need to supplement. Vitamin D is critical. And again, eliminate risk factors. If you can reduce smoking or alcohol intake. Also, you know, look at fall prevention around the house. A lot of things happen with when you're not in the moment. And a famous researcher in fall prevention said when anything's new, whether it's new medications, new glasses, new shoes, a new location, that you might be more at risk. I know I was at a friend's house and they had a step down, which I didn't see into their living room. And I didn't fall, but I tripped on it. But you know, it was new. I was out of my element. And so be in the moment, wear good shoes, light, safe clothing, do exercises that are safe. And we have bone fit trained individuals in our community that are specially trained to help people who may be at risk of fracture. Give us a call, look at our website. We have lots of resources. And I know Mark has a slide on that.
Yeah.
And
that was wonderful. Yes. Judy, I so appreciate you being on the program. I could talk to you for hours about bone health and all that you have to offer. Thank you, and thank you for being here, even with
You're
your
welcome.
voice.
My pleasure.
Thank you to our viewing audience as well for joining us to learn more around programs, services, and resources that are available to you and also to your family. Please take care and stay safe.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com. Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
In para-hockey, the ice tilts in favor of men. But that will never stop us.
United by passion, battling for equity. We are the National Women's Para-Hockey Team of Canada.
We're here.
We're hungry.
We're ready.